Yes, indeedy, folks. It's the Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Beautiful, isn't she? Unfortunately, this is a rendition from 1908. She is a woman that we do not know how she looked. However, by her contemporaries, she was described as imposing and stunning, both intellectually and physically. Standing 5 feet 9, possessing fine features and a mesmerizing speaking voice. Hypatia of Alexandria, a gifted female philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician who flourished in Roman Egypt. There have been many homages to her over the years. From the history, we know that she was apt at swimming, rowing, climbing mountains, riding horseback, walking distances of 10 miles without tiring. Instead of wearing traditional female garb, she dressed in the clothing of a scholar and moved about Alexandria freely. Indeed, she moved about, commanding her own chariot. She was the daughter of the philosopher Theon, a teacher of mathematics at the Museum of Alexandria. He was also her most important teacher and mentor. The museum was home to the great Library of Alexandria. Hypatia was known throughout Alexandria, and those who were able to afford it sent their children or brought themselves to Alexandria specifically to listen to her discourses on philosophy, astronomy, and mathematics. She traveled to both Athens and Italy to study. She frequently appeared in public in the presence of magistrates, and she thought nothing of joining an assembly of men. A Christian historian who was her contemporary observed that her discipline of mind was such that it gave her an ease of manner with which all men were comfortable. He observed, "For all men, on account of her extraordinary dignity and virtue, admire her the more." She was a Hellenist and taught the philosophies of Plato and Aristotle. Even being a Hellenist, she was sought out by Christians and foreigners for her teachings. By the beginning of the 5th century, she led the Neoplatonic school in Alexandria. Neoplatonism dominated Greek philosophical schools and remained predominant until the teaching of philosophy by pagans was outlawed in the second half of the 6th century current era. Hypatia encouraged the expansion of human knowledge through the study of science, logic, and mathematics. She adamantly discouraged believing in mysticism. Today, we call this approach to life humanism. By the year 412, there was a very contentious power struggle between the Roman perfect, who was responsible for Alexandria, and the leader of one of the city's dominant Christian churches, a man named Cyril. The contention became so bad that around 414 to 415, monks assaulted and badly injured Orestes, the Roman perfect. The perfect had the leaders of the mob rounded up and tortured to death. Cyril tried to make the executed men into martyrs. However, the local leaders would not condone such a thing, and Cyril had to back off. Throughout the struggle, Hypatia was a dedicated and very influential friend of the Roman prefect Orestes. Hypatia's reputation and her commitment to science and rejection of superstition were powerful influences in the city of Alexandria as the struggle continued. Of course, anyone who was not Christian was considered a pagan, irregardless of their background. Religious animosity toward Hypatia was fomented in the Christian church. During Lent, in March of 415, a mob stopped Hypatia in her chariot on her way home. The mob stripped her naked and drug her through the town to a recently converted pagan church that was now a Christian church. There, they used clamshells to scrape the skin off of her. They threw her scraped body onto a fire, and when it was over, they scattered her remains throughout the city. Some reports say that the scraping of her skin using clamshells was done while she was alive, as was throwing her on the fire. Other accounts say that it was her body that was scraped and burned. Some have likened her to be the first woman in a long line to experience the Christian church's approach to effective women, the approach we know as a witch hunt. Others have called Hypatia's death the death of Hellenism. And, indeed, it was this time, just 100 years after Constantine had declared the Roman Empire a Christian empire. It was this time, the very early 400s. It was this time that ushered in the murder of Hypatia. It was this time that Western civilization sank into what we call the early Middle Ages, also known as the Dark Ages. And now it's time to continue our drive on the necklace round the Albions. This is our second part of the adventure, driving the road that goes around the Albion mountain range. This road has been described as a necklace that stretches around the Albion mountains, with its crown jewel down in the very southernmost point, the crown jewel of the city of rocks. On our last journey, we looked at what appeared to be an old bank in Delco. We looked at the old normal school in Albion, as well as a historic site for Diamond Field Jack. We remembered when Albion was the edge of the world before there was irrigation up on the Snake River Plain. We stopped by a historical site where you could see the City of Rocks off in the distance. The City of Rocks itself covers one drainage of the eastern slope on the southern end of the Albion Mountains. This is the Circle Creek drainage, a small stream that heads toward the south and the east, and eventually dissipating into the desert along the Utah border. We took a bit of time to enjoy beautiful Almo, the last city before you turn to the right and head onto a dirt road that goes to the City of Rocks. Today we begin our journey on this dirt road going into the City of Rocks. To get an idea of where we're headed to, here's a map of the City of Rocks National Reserve. We'll be breaking our drive into 3 particular segments. First, from Alamo up to Register Rock. Then from Register Rock to the Junction entrance. And then from Register Rock up to the Emery Canyon entrance. So let's get on a nice, smooth dirt road that goes into the National Reserve and up to Register Rock. At the entrance to the reserve, there is a lovely little interpretive sign. Always worth stopping and reading, I have found. This is looking back toward Alamo from the entrance to the reserve. And the road at the entrance heading into the reserve. And this is the Circle Creek drainage of the Albion Mountains, the City of Rocks. This area, the City of Rocks, was a favorite place for camping along the California Trail. Many journals from that time described the area as a good and pleasant place. They sang its praises. Circle Creek provided water, there was ample fuel for fires, and there was grass for the livestock. There was one other attraction that they had not found while they traveled for months across the broad plains and deserts that brought them to this point. At this place, there were these large rocks that provided shelter and also provided a stunning area unlike what they were used to. I can only imagine what it was like when the moon was shining on this area with these huge boulders surrounding their camps. Several of my friends have told me there is nothing like being camped out among these boulders on a full moonlit night, or on one of those nights when the stars are filling the sky and the Milky Way is your umbrella. At Register Rock, we leave the Circle Creek drainage and head over into a broader plain, still going through some magnificent country, but country where the passage on the California Trail is even more evident. After a few miles on a road that heads due south, we pull into a small historic site. Here we are looking north, the direction from whence we came. Here we are looking south. And off to the east. It is the 3rd of October, and the late summer flowers are in bloom. The pioneers on the California Trail spread out so that the dust would not be in their face and their cattle could graze on this broad valley. In the distance was Pinnacle Pass, where they would once again form into a line, go through a narrow pass, and head toward the south and the west on their trek to California. Many emigrants noted in their journals that the pass through Pinnacle Pass was a very rough and rugged time. In later years, heavy freight wagons used this pass in order to take mining equipment into Idaho. The pass was so steep on the other side that they installed cables for getting their wagons down the rugged slope. The pass was so rugged that when the highway department decided to put in the road that we are driving on, they went to the north and dynamited out a passage that was easier to do. Just to the west of Pinnacle Pass, there are the Twin Sisters dominating the landscape. As the modern road turns toward the west in order to pass by the Twin Sisters, we get a splendid view of some very rugged mountains. And then we get to drive by the lovely Twin Sisters. Passing the stunning twin sisters, we look around the area that the immigrants faced once they passed Pinnacle Pass. Here is the other side of Pinnacle Pass itself. Having gone through Pinnacle Pass, the immigrants looked out over yet another broad, empty valley, and they could not help but look back and remember their passage through the City of Rocks. Many diaries showed sketches and told stories of looking back and seeing the twin sisters fading into the distance. This historic sign points out that while the twin sisters were appreciated for their scenic wonders by the immigrants did not know that they are also geologic wonders. Although they appear so similar, they are actually very different geologic formations and were formed millions of years apart. And now, let's drive the few miles left to the junction entrance in the southwest corner of the National Reserve. At junction entrance, we come to an important crossroads. While the modern road leads off to the west and the north, the California Trail loops down toward the south and the west. It was near this point that the Salt Lake alternate route of the California Trail joined the California Trail that came down from the Oregon Trail. Years later, in 1869, after the first transcontinental railroad was built, the Kelton-Boise stage line would build a home station at this point called the City of Rocks Home Station. We'll talk more about that when we look at the history of the stage line through this area. For the immigrants, there were no home-cooked meals at this site. There was only an open, expansive desert stretching before them. They pushed on, heading toward the Humboldt River, which would lead them toward Reno and the difficult pass over the Sierra Nevada mountains. We, fortunately, are driving in automobiles. And since we want to see more of the City of Rocks, we don't think much about turning around and driving back. Back across a particularly rough part of the road to Register Rock, where we leave this week's journey on the necklace around the Albions. Next time, we'll go exploring the spectacular drive on the southwest side of the Circle Creek drainage. The district attorney could not believe his ears when he heard the innocent verdict. "How on earth," he ranted, "how on earth could you find this person innocent?" The foreman of the jury said, "Well, sir, we found him innocent for reasons of insanity." "That's obvious," replied the district attorney. "But all 12 of you?" And that's another Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you next week. And in the meantime, keep celebrating the Great Wahoo.